Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back again. It's Wednesday evening, afternoon, nighttime. Still depends on where you're at. Here in the rain-soaked region of the Central Coast, California, it's what we call late afternoon. We're holding on for our dear lives, trying not to get washed away here. If I lose power during this live stream, just go ahead and finish without me. But I think we're gonna be okay. I'm in a pretty sweet spot right here, so it's all good. It's nothing like it was down in Keith's neighborhood a couple months ago. Thank God, at least not yet. But keep us in your prayers. Hey, tonight we've got a really special guest. I'm really happy to have Greg Stowell with us. He is going to talk a little bit about, how to know your numbers. Now, Greg Stowell is from Clinton Glass over there in Tennessee, right?
Yeah, we are in Knoxville, Tennessee, East Tennessee. We're not far from Billy Britt, just across over the mountains.
Oh, man. Wow, you're in good company. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over to Greg. And yeah, feel free to just tell us what you know about that. And then we'll see if we've got some questions for you. I'm sure we'll probably have plenty.
Okay, a couple quick things. Numbers can be dry, so I'm going to do my best to make this not dry. But I noticed that over the last 15 years, as I would go from glass company to glass company and start talking to guys, not everybody knew their numbers. Mm-hmm. And they thought maybe what they made was what their profit was and that type of thing. So having come from a background where I was kind of school of hard knocks, forced to learn how numbers work, I thought maybe I'd share what some of you guys obviously already know, but I learned the hard way. So I thought I would share that a little bit. I'm Greg Stowell, Clinton Glass Company, Knoxville, Tennessee. 40 years in the residential glass business, the first 40 years in residential business, 25 years in kitchen cabinetry, 15 years in glass. Family-owned business, 7 kids in the family. Dad owned the company. My brother took it over when my dad retired. And that's where I learned numbers. My brother was a numbers guy and served me very well in the glass business. So we bought Clinton Glass in 2008. It was a commercial glass company doing just about $1 million a year. We found out we did not like the commercial world, and people started asking us about shower doors. So we went from 0 shower doors and we shifted all the way over to residential shower glass. We do shower glass and a little bit of mirrors, a little bit of office glass, wine rooms, that type of thing. But we do about 240 to 250 showers a month, 4 installation crews. And it's been a good shift. So I know some of you guys are bigger than that. Some of you guys are smaller than that. But I will tell you, the only way, if you want to scale, which we talked about last week, the only way you're going to scale is to have money to do it. And the only way you're going to have money to do it is to know your number. So with that said, Chris, you said I could share the screen. I've got some slides. So you tell me what to do here. Do I share screen? Does that work? Desktop one.
There we go, I think.
Can you see any of this, or you can see none of it?
There's a big green button at the bottom of mine that says share screen right in the middle at the bottom.
Yeah, same. Man, this is a hell of a teaser, Greg. I can't wait to hear what you got to say. Let's go.
Okay, guys, can you hear any of it? Can you see any of it?
I can see in here, but I
I
don't.
can hear you. Not seeing any content.
There's no help yet.
Okay, well, I apologize. I should have run a dry run on this. Of course, I can see it. Zoom apparently is asking me if it can share the screen. I'm going to share that screen. Share.
Oh, here it comes.
There you
Here
go.
it is. We're
Success.
good, bud. Boom.
Boom.
There's both.
Okay, my apologies. How about that? Can you see that or no?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's perfect.
Okay, so know your numbers. Number one, the most important number, and this number gets you other numbers, and that is your break even. And the break even is the sales volume at which you cross over from losing money to making money for a certain time period based on current sales, pricing, and expenses, commonly measured monthly. So the break even point is the time, usually around day 27, somewhere around there, could be earlier, could be later, of which you go from losing money to making money. In order to get there, you have to determine what your break even number is. Your break even does fluctuate a little bit month to month based on certain things, but your break even should be fairly consistent. Number one, in order to determine your break even, you must determine your cost of goods sold, which is direct labor and materials. Direct labor is the amount you pay in wages and benefits to directly produce and install products, shower glass and mirrors. So my recommendation is if you're not doing your break even in your cost of goods sold, your direct labor and materials, so often I say, hey, what's your costs to guys in the shower business? And they're like, well, I pay $500 for the glass, hinges are $200 and clamps are $200. And they're giving you the cost of the materials for the shower, but they're not giving you the cost of goods sold. So the cost of goods sold, the first part is direct labor. That is everybody who's directly involved in installing the product, servicing the product, shop floor guys, cutting the product. You want to separate those guys out on your payroll. So right now, if your payroll, let's say you have a shop of 5 guys, two guys are installing, 1 guy's cutting, those 3 guys are direct labor. And that is a number you're gonna categorize and separate every single month. I'd recommend QuickBooks. If you have something else, that's fine. The next is materials. Materials are the parts to make your showers, the glasses, hinges, silicone, sweeps. This also includes remakes, warranties, materials. Again, so often I see a guy say, how much you make? Well, I made $500 on the last shower. Well, you had to go back again because you had a scratch panel. You had to replace that, and Oldcastle didn't pay for that. So you didn't make $500 on that shower because you had to pay for another panel. Does that make sense? So you're going to measure your direct labor and your materials, I would recommend, over a month's period. What if you're a guy who does some work in the shop and you also are out there estimating in the field? You're only going to calculate the direct labor is the percentage that you put into actually installing the product. Does that make sense? Am I boring everyone yet?
No, keep going.
Okay. So this cost of goods sold number is critical to determining your break even and your profitability. So your cost of goods sold, direct labor and materials. If you are currently mixing your labor all in one, that's not good. Number 2, you're going to total up your overhead and admin numbers. So this is everything else, your non-direct labor, your estimators, your bookkeepers, your schedulers, receptionists, and your overhead items, rent, insurance bill, loan payments, taxes, etc. That is all going to be your admin side or your overhead side. And you're going to add that up on a monthly basis. And I put a little note in here, your pay is overhead, not profit. Because so often I'll run into guys, how you do? Oh, pretty good. I made 80 grand last year. Well, if you're also installing shower doors, you didn't profit 80 grand because you just basically paid yourself 80 grand to install shower doors. So your pay is overhead, or it would be direct labor in that case if you're installing shower doors. But make sure you take your pay and you allocate it appropriately. If for some reason you made $100,000, but really you spent 50 grand on yourself installing shower doors, the company made 50,000. Does that make sense? So now you have your cost of goods sold, which is your direct labor, which is your materials. You've added them up over a whole month and categorized them. And now you're going to add up your overhead, admin, and now you're going to determine your gross profit margin. And that is your total sales minus the cost of goods sold divided by total sales. Make sense? So for instance, I've narrowed it down to $1,000. So you've got $1,000 sale. You can scale it to 10,000, 100,000, million. Your cost of goods sold is $550 because you added up your material and your labor over that. And now there's $450 left on that $1,000. So your gross profit margin is 45%. Now that is just a number I've made up. You guys may look at that and go, man, his numbers stink. Or you may go, hey, those are about what my numbers are. I don't know, but I've just made up a number. So your 45% gross profit margin. Now you are going to calculate your break-even number from your direct labor, your materials, your overhead admin, and now and you've created your gross profit margin. Now you're going to do your break-even. That is your overhead admin number, which was here. Where's my admin? There it is, admin there. And now you're going to count and you're going to divide that by your gross profit margin. So we remember by the last one, we had 45% gross profit margin. So if I'm a small business and I have $25,000 of overhead, and what's in my overhead number? Rent, truck payments, bookkeeper, estimator, office type stuff, not directly putting in the product. So you have $25,000 overhead, you have a 45% gross profit margin, 25,000 divided by 0.45, that's $55,555. That is this company's break-even number. So this company, if you run a company with a 45% gross profit margin with $25,000 overhead, your break-even is $55,555. And another way to think of it is 45 cents of every dollar goes to overhead until getting above break-even. So every single time you sell a product, you sell $1,000 that day, well, $450 went to overhead. So that's how you get to your break-even number. Now, this is a calculation that once you get used to it, it's automatic. I'm sure Keith can tell you they're real deep into these numbers. So what impressed me about Keith was, and those guys, is that they were so deep in their numbers, they knew quarter inch wasn't making money for them, and they dumped it. And they had a tempering facility, and they were buying by the truckload, and they still knew their numbers so well that they knew quarter inch wasn't making money. Mm-hmm. So this is 45 cents of every dollar goes to overhead, or 0.45, or 45% gross profit margin. Here's an example, ABC Glass Company. Remember the old days when people would put A in their name to be first in the yellow pages?
That's right. That's right.
A1.
Aardvark. Aardvark.
Steak sauce.
So ABC Glass Company had sales of $80,000 in June. Their cost of goods sold was made up of two things: direct labor and materials, 35 and 20%. So 35% materials, 20% direct labor percentage. So that's the pay and benefits for the guys that are doing the work to actively, in this case, make or install the product. So gross profit margin of 45%. Their admin overhead is $30,000 a month. What is this company's break-even number? Did this company make or lose money in June? And how much did they make or lose? Anybody got any guesses?
Well, it seems like if their overhead is $30,000 per month, it would be simple to say, well, they'd have to make that to break even.
Right. They need to make $30,000 in gross profit margin in order to cover what they used to call covering your monthly nut.
Right.
Now it's 30,000. So the answer is break even was $667,000, and they made money. They had 80,000 in sales. Their cost of goods sold was 55%. If you go back, materials 35%, direct labor 20%. Those added up are 55%, and that 55% is what is your cost of goods sold, leaving 45% for gross profit margin. So again, they're making 45 cents on the dollar, like the first example. So they spent 44,000 on labor and materials, 55% cost of goods sold, leaving 36,000 for admin overhead. Admin overhead was 30,000, so they made $6,000. Make sense?
Right, because the cost of goods sold is separate from your overhead. You add those two together, and that's what you need to break even.
You're going to add your cost of goods sold and your direct labor together to determine your gross profit margin. So I find what a lot of glass shops do that I bumped into is they mix their labor together. They got an estimator, they got somebody in the bookkeeper, and they got somebody who's installing, and they got somebody in the shop, and they go, my payroll is X. My payroll is 15 grand. So I know I got to do more than 15 grand, plus I got to do markup, and they're mixing together the direct labor and the overhead admin. Remember, the overhead admin has some labor in it. It has office labor, estimators, bookkeepers, people answering the phone, receptionists, people that are not directly involved in installing the product are part of your overhead admin. They are not part of your direct labor. So it is important you separate those labor numbers, and you have your materials and your direct labor, and you add those up, and that's cost of goods sold. These aren't numbers, obviously, that I made up. Well, the particular numbers, but as far as cost of goods sold, direct labor, very common. very common of how you do it. If you look at this and go, well, that's not how I do it, I'm just going to mix my numbers together. It's how I've always done it. That's fine. It's just, this is how you get to knowing where you are. This is how you get to making more money and scaling, really, is what it comes down to. So in this case, admin overhead, so they made $6,000. Now, the major issue is once you determine what your break-even number is, and it's going to take a few months to get to that break-even. 1 month, you can obviously calculate it, but you can say, hey, Greg, we had a 5-paycheck month. Or Greg, we did a job and we didn't get to bill it till the following month. You know, gosh, my guys did $20,000 worth of work the last week and we didn't bill it until the next month. Yes, that will even out over time where you're going to be able to add up those, where you're going to be able to get
average it out, right?
Yeah, where your direct labor is versus where your materials are. But so it's, and this is not hard to do. Once you start separating out direct labor and cost and your materials and get to your cost of goods sold, right in QuickBooks, it puts it right up there. Cost of goods sold, direct labor, materials, boom. And if you know what it is, I literally know what my break even is every month because of this formula. And so I know what we're installing. I can tell you pretty closely how much money we're going to make that month before the month starts. So if you're wondering at the end of the month, I wonder how we're going to do, boy, I can't wait to see how this comes out. We had a pretty good month. Well, you should know that information beforehand if you have a fairly consistent cost of good materials, fairly consistent direct labor. Make sense?
Sure.
Have I lost? Is everybody bored? Is everybody like, what is he talking?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I love this. I mean, like I'm eating this up. Greg, do you see a scenario from an accounting standpoint where the labor would not be, and I'm talking from an accounting standpoint, where the labor would not be included in the cost of goods sold? Like it would be in overhead. Like for instance, I guess my first question is, are your guys hourly, salary, or commission?
I have some hourly and some salary, but I do have like a salary guy who does 90% of his stuff is direct labor. I just put them all in direct labor. I guess I could see it because everything we do is kind of value added. We cut glass. I don't just take a product like a CRL mirror plate and put it on the counter and say it's 70% markup. Does that make sense?
Is your manufacturing and your installation two separate companies?
They are not right now. They're
Okay,
one.
so now I know why. Okay. I love this and I second everything you're putting in here. And I think everybody should try and take the next week or two to memorize this formula, even though it might look Greek right now. I got to the point in the last 2 years where I go out to a customer's house and figure out what my glass costs. I can do it within 3 minutes. And then I know my multiple, divide by my cost of goods sold, R multiple X. And I price the job, boom, right there. Mm-hmm. And I know within a percentage point or two of my fluctuation where I can go down based on our break even. And of course, I'm always trying to be above that because I want to carry the trophy every month. But this is critical to the growth of the business. This is awesome.
Yeah. So determining your break even, what's great about the break even number is that it forces you to do your other numbers as well. You have to
hold you accountable on your direct labor.
Yeah. And so now I'm going to talk about a few things. So let me see what we're doing for time. Actually, we're doing pretty good. I'm going to talk about some areas where what's next. Once you know this number, then the fun begins. Because the main goal is you want to measure and improve the number. And your goal is to have the lowest possible break-even number and get as far above it as possible. You want to have the lowest possible break-even and get as far above it as possible. That does not mean sacrifice customer service. That does not mean don't replace things when they're scratched. It means what is it that you can do? And the first thing is reduce errors. Bigger than you think. Focus on completion percentage. When we first started in the shower door business, probably 50% of our shower doors went in. And the other 50%, that we mismeasured, or that panel, or there was a tile, or the hardware was wrong, or, I mean, we all know the story, right? And this is when we started. If I asked you guys right now, put you on the spot, what's your completion percentage for shower installations? Would you know that number? And I mean, you go out to do 2 jobs that day. You go out to make up a number. Let's say you guys somebody does 3 showers a week. So you're
Uh-huh.
putting in 12 showers a month. How many of those showers go in? The first time. You put them in, you put in the hardware, you silicone it, except for Chris, because he doesn't silicone,
Right.
and then you get paid.
Sorry.
That was a compliment, Chris.
I know.
So,
I know.
now, our completion percentage right now, I think it's fairly good. It needs to be better. We're probably around 96, 97% completion
Nice.
on shower doors.
That's pretty good.
And we're doing what, 240 showers a month, sometimes 250 showers a month. So you can go, well, that sounds really good. Well, let's say it's 95%. That means 5% don't go in. So that means what, 12, 13 showers a month don't go in? Now that sounds terrible, doesn't it? So why do showers not go in? Well, we know mismeasure, fabrication mistake, scratches, chips, hardware isn't right, anything, hardware, you open up the pack or whatever's not there. So if I'm in your shoes and I want to get that break-even number down, I want to focus on my completion percentage. So is my measuring right? Is my hardware right? Did I confirm it with the customer? Do I get out to the job and the builder goes, brush nickel? I said matte black. And you got a truck with glass on it and you got all your hardware and you got the wrong finish. You got the wrong hardware finish. So a lot of these details will save you so much money. My materials percentage dropped significantly when we started tracking errors and reducing them greatly. So I would say, if you don't know your completion percentage on shower doors, you should. And where is the low-hanging fruit and how do you fix it? Make sense?
Yeah.
Direct labor. Somebody was on this call last week and made a real major point, and that was, I think it was the gentleman from either Pittsburgh or West Virginia. He talked about he hired a bookkeeper and was worried what it was going to do to his bottom line. And not a bookkeeper, a scheduler. And you remember what he said? She really did a fantastic job of scheduling product. So
Yeah,
they really put in a lot more product.
Yep.
brilliant.
So they weren't working the guys twice as hard. They weren't working them 4 times as hard or send them out at 6 a.m. and they get back at midnight. What they were doing was taking that downtime, that lag time. Maybe it was distance. Maybe the guys were driving 60 miles between jobs when they could have been better coordinated. Whatever that scheduler did for him, he was like, wow, what a difference. And that's the second number. Dollars per day, week, or month. What does your crew put in? How many crews do you have? One? Do they put in $500,000 a year? Do they put in $1 million a year? Do they put in $1.5 million a year? And what is your dollars per employee? How much volume did your company do last year? And how many employees did you have? If you did $2 million and you have 10 employees, that's $200,000 an employee. The higher that number is, the better off you're going to be, both from an admin standpoint point of view and from a direct labor standpoint. And again, a lot of that is, so I would be measuring my completion percentage, which we do, and then the dollars per day. I get a daily report on how much product our crew is putting in.
These are great examples, Greg. Everyone should be eating this stuff up right here. And it's not hard to track these numbers once you actually start doing this stuff. Just build out a spreadsheet. Start with a spreadsheet. Just build out a spreadsheet and just daily tracker, and literally just start somewhere tracking something. Go back.
You can write it on a pad of paper if you want, Brandon, right? Write it down somewhere. Start measuring. If you don't know where you are, the old saying, you don't know where you're going.
Right.
And it's amazing how much money gets left out. That if you just measured, you'd be shocked. I think the first one, the reduce errors, I think that's insidious, because what happens is, my next slide, and I'll come back. This is my favorite. This is one of my slides. Biggest profit killer in the glass business. We have to go back to that job. Guys come back and they go, how'd it go? We have to go back to that job. 2 guys in a truck. Have you thought about how much 2 guys in a truck cost?
All the time.
And you know what? Most people don't finish it. It's not only what does that cost, it's what they could have been making if they didn't have to go back there. So it's almost like a
Correct.
3X. I mean, it's sick.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Not only because the guy, oh, well, we'll put the towel bar on when we get back out there, and you know what else happens? You don't put the towel bar hat on. The next day, you get in the office, there's a voicemail. It's Mrs. Jones. This is Mrs. Jones. I'm the lady that's missing the towel bar. I noticed when I was looking at the shower tonight that there's a little scratch.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Mrs.
so
Jones would not have
true.
been looking for the scratch if you put the towel bar on.
Exactly. That is really true.
So making that first one, because you know why? You feel busy. You get the guys are in the truck, they're taking the towel bar, they're finishing the job. Oh, good, we're just gonna put the towel bar on, we'll get paid. That's great thing. It is so expensive to put 2 guys in a truck. And no offense to them, they don't know. They don't know how expensive it is. And they know they're helping. They're putting the towel bar on that maybe got back orders or didn't get, or showed up dented or scratched, whatever. I'm not blaming the crew. I'm saying there might have been something else. Maybe it was an admin side. Maybe you should be checking your hardware more before it goes out. Maybe you should be opening and looking at it, whatever it is. But that's expensive, super expensive. Then materials. I put the materials down there because I think a lot of people jump to materials right away for different suppliers or purchase in bulk. I think Brandon had one of his Facebook videos. He had 1,000 hinges and boxes from CRL last week. Now that may be just what Brandon goes through in a week, but if you have the capital to purchase materials in bulk, you can have some substantial material savings.
Mhm.
But you got to have the money to do it. And so many of my competitors don't. So they're buying the glass and 2 hinges and a handle and a sweep. No offense, some of you guys do that now. But the point is, if you want to get your materials percentage down, you're going to need to buy materials in greater quantities. And to do that, you need money. And to get that, you got to get above break even. Overhead, technology, productivity. You guys, I think you guys were talking about that just before the thing started, the software, the showers online software, all those things to help either minimize the amount of labor involved, minimize the amount of errors in, then obviously paying off debt. Paying off debt's a big one. The last recession, we had 2 glass shops go under because they had, during the boom times, had bought the trucks with payments, bought the edger with payments, bought this other stuff. If the market goes down, they weren't ready. And now all of a sudden their overhead is too high. And when their sales volume dropped and their margins dropped during the recession, they didn't have enough left over to get above break even. So you know your break even number, you know what you need to sell. So you may go, oh my gosh, I need 3 more showers this month to break even. If it's I know we've been booming the last 10 years, but when things get a little tighter, you need to know that break even number so you can get above it and stay above it. We have to go back to that job.
I hate those.
We
It's
have
the
to
worst
go back.
feeling in the world.
No.
It is. Customers don't like it. No, but there's no winner. And we
But
have
I'm
No
like
winner.
Greg. I'm like Greg. I'm in the 90%
Mhm.
area where my jobs are get complete.
And you know what? One of the ways we keep it, I made a mistake that I knew I made a mistake right before this presentation. I was checking an order. We had pre-done the order in brush nickel. Guys get out to the job. They go, it's matte black. My fault. But guess what? I stock. There was transom clamps, P190s, glass to glass hinge, wall mount hinge. I stock it all in matte black. We threw it in a basket, got out to the job, apologized to the customer. He's like, no problem. And we got the job done. So even though we made a mistake, we carried enough inventory so that we could actually get out to the job in 20 minutes. They finished the shower that day. Did we waste time? Oh, sure. I wasted time driving myself to the job. I drove the hardware myself. I was so embarrassed. So finishing jobs, getting them done is critical.
Can I add to that?
Yes, sir.
We tracked all of our jobs in the beginning so much, the problems that we ended up stocking all of the trucks with like the top 5 repairs for these so-called problems, because it was just getting out of control. And we were so focused on all these good numbers, we weren't looking at that number.
Yep.
And once we caught wind of that on paper, we ended up stocking the trucks with the extra hinges, the extra handles, and keeping constant inventory in the trucks, because we had the inventory is just sitting at the warehouse, which is not doing any good there if it's not at the job. And so each truck has these backup sets just to help alleviate those callbacks.
Yep, good point. And our trucks do the same because you've got the tall vans like we do. You've got room in those vans. So we're carrying brushed nickel hardware. In this case, there was quite a bit of hardware. It was a large shower and I had to compensate for it. So, but we did have it in the shop in this case, but definitely save time even more, put it on the truck. Great idea.
Yeah, you can't always have an extra one of everything on every truck, but you definitely can have,
The
extra
common
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah,
The common
you
stuff.
know what you use all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good
All right,
stuff, Greg.
That's all the slides I got. I'm going to hit, I don't know if I hit stop share.
Perfect. Yeah, just stop sharing. And we'll see if anybody has some questions for Greg. I'm sure there are some.
It's excellent stuff. I just want to say that he's done a great job doing his presentation.
So Greg, do your let's unpack this. How are your salespeople using?
Somebody's backing up. Look out. Look out.
Keith or just me?
Okay.
Keith, we lost you a little bit.
You're
Nope.
on mute.
No, you're mute.
Okay. Are you taking this algorithm, whatever you call, to this? Are the salespeople using that at the house, or have you pre-priced a lot of your stuff? Are they pricing at the house? Are they selling at the house?
That's a great comment. No, in an area for improvement right now, we price same day. We do not price at the house. The next step is price. We actually price, I take that back. We price one job at the house a day. The guys do about 5 to 6 appointments a day. And now the next step is, and I've got to do that before the slowdown. So yes, that's something I have to do. I have not gotten to your level yet, but that's an excellent way to, again, what I didn't want to do tonight was bog down on other stuff like leads, quotes. No offense, Keith, I'm not trying, because I didn't want to make the presentation 7 hours long.
No. But
I
that we
apologize.
use your algorithm that you put together
Right.
at the house. That's why I was like, it's so perfect.
Yeah, nice. No, we don't. That's what's next.
Mhm.
So,
Nice. Good question, man. Good question.
but I would say, and I don't mean to beat this drum, but if you're mixing all your payroll right now and saying, well, what I've done is works for me, you really need to determine your cost of goods sold, your direct labor, and separate it out from your admin overhead numbers. You really do in order to get your gross profit margin.
So Greg, on QuickBooks, for instance, how do you get direct labor switched up to goods sold from an overhead number?
It's a category in QuickBooks. So my wife does all the QuickBooks stuff. She's in the room, but so there is a category. So if I were to show you one of my, I don't have one in front of me, but right on my thing, I have gross revenue, total revenues, and then I have cost of goods sold, and then I have direct labor and materials. And those are right there every single month. And the percentages are right there. So I'm constantly pestering my lovely wife, what are the materials looking like? I can get into QuickBooks, but she's usually in it all the time. But yes, you can categorize those specifically. And that should.
So direct labor is already in there as a category. I don't need to. I'll have to look at that.
I believe so.
That ties in hand to hand with your workman's comp too for your numbers, like your direct labor and your overhead labor. Like you got different rates for workman's comp as well. So if you're not separating stuff out and workman's comp is categorizing everybody as direct labor, you're spending a lot more on workman's comp than you are as an office salesperson or whatever that's different classification for workman's comp for your company.
Yeah. In our case, I think our shop guys might be 7 or 8%. And the office staff, I think, is 1/2 of 1% or something like that.
It's true.
Which that's a lot of money at the end of the year, depending upon how many crews you have. But I thought it was the reason I contacted Chris and asked about the numbers because Bill's presentation was so good about scaling and everybody wants to scale. Bill has terrific ideas on scaling. And I was kind of like, without money, you're not going to scale. Anytime you want to scale, you need to be able to, borrowing is fine, but you need to be able to say, okay, we're generating this much money every month in profit. And that's how you're going to scale. Whether it's you want to get to 5 locations or just 3 crews and stay in the same location, if you don't know your numbers, you're not going to get there.
Well, if you're going to borrow money, the bankers are going to need to know the numbers. So if you don't want to be embarrassed when you go to the banker, you got to know your numbers for sure.
Yeah.
You're going to have to sell him too.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of thinking the same thing, Keith. It's like you need to be speaking the same language. I mean, when you say profits, I mean, you have to be, it has to mean the same thing as the guy that's listening to. It's just like if you're taking measurements, you've got to be able to communicate those measurements accurately, or else you're not going to get the product that you're ordering, you know? So knowing what these numbers are and how to define them is a huge thing if you want to grow.
Yeah. And also, even if you want to stay where you're at, I mean, if you know, I talked to a guy and I'm like, how's your business doing? Good. I took 120 grand out of it last year. Well, are you at home checking numbers, or are you actually, oh no, I'm out estimating and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I'm okay. Well, you got to take that labor out because that's not profits. Because if you were to ever sell your business, you're gone. So whoever buys your business has to replace the labor you do. And that's part of the direct labor and overhead.
Yeah. Add back.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I
the
have a
other
question.
thing you want to know those numbers, because as you do scale, if you have intentions of selling the business one day, there's, you know, a baseline of nomenclature when you're selling a business. You know, what's your gross profit margin? What's your net margin? You know, you need to know all those things so you can focus on all the intangibles when you're trying to sell something. This is so important, the most important.
Mm-hmm.
You always hear the phrase, you know, people before profits, or they put there. I hate that company. They put profits before people. And without profits, there is no company. And it doesn't mean one is at the expense of the other. As you can see with the Dobbins, they have a phenomenal culture. They have great employees, and there is a hybrid relationship where you can maximize profits and maximize the great culture that you have. So they aren't mutually exclusive. But when I hear the phrase people before profits or profit, I mean, without profits, you got nothing. You're a charity.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way that you can promise your employees anything for the future if you're not making sure that you're profitable every year, right?
Right. And then profit, I mean, how many small businesses here have added 401ks, added health insurance, right? Every small glass shop owner I talk to, you do health insurance? Oh, that's killing me. Well, I haven't added it. How do you know if you can afford it? It's certainly an expense. And you got to know your numbers in order to determine if you can offer these additional benefits. Can you give a pay raise out? Well, how do you remember when glass went up 35, 40%?
I do.
Nobody remembered that, I'm sure. I remember talking to a guy and he's like, yeah, I got to raise my prices 35%. And I remember thinking at the time, well, good for you if you can get 35%, but you don't need 35% to maintain the same margin that you were at before, because the 35% was on glass. His labor didn't go up 35% overnight. His overhead didn't go up 35% overnight. Everything else didn't. So when I hear phrases like that, I think, I wonder if they know their numbers. I mean, in this case, it was an error to their benefit if they could get the additional 35%.
Critical stuff for sure. Numbers are just as important as installing a shower door. So yeah, definitely.
So for you guys that fabricate, I think we have Greg, Keith, Shannon. Anybody else that does their own tempering in the group? No. So have you guys run your numbers to see if you're more profitable as a shower door company or as a glass fabricator?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to answer from a standpoint of somebody who does not know his numbers as well as Keith does, but I can tell you that fabricating our own glass does two things. You make money as a fabricator and you make money as a retail glass shop. So you've got two profit numbers there that you can deal with, and in addition, you gain incredible control. The feeling of helplessness of buying from fabricators is one that is burned in my mind. And at the shop, we have like a running joke, and that is, can you imagine if we had to keep buying from fabricators with the stuff that we got? I mean, you guys have had these special jobs. The tile goes this way and the bench goes that way, and the tile guy looks like he was having an experimental day of building a shower, and you got to put the glass in. And when you fabricate your own stuff, you can fix those problems instead of trying to get through to a person on the other end of the line. Please remember to put the notch there. Please remember it's got to go like this. And then so to answer your questions, if you have the capital to start fabricating, because remember the reason most people don't want to fabricate is because of the expense. Because whether or not my volume goes up or down, I still have a tempering oven. I still got the shop floor. I still got the electric bill. I still got all those things that I got to face. But you got to decide whether or not you're going to have enough volume to support it. But if it is in your intestinal fortitude to take on fabricating, I find it's either one of those. I ask people about fabricating and I get 2 responses. Oh my God, no, I would never. Are you kidding me? A tempering oven? I'd go broke. And then the other person's like, tell me more. What do you mean? And that's, so if you're asking if fabricating is worth it, I would never go back. If you tell me, is it more profitable? Yes. Is there more risk? Yes. Are you now running a fabrication facility? Yes. Would I go back? No. If you took away my fabrication, I would sell the business.
To add to what you were saying, Greg. So when we started fabrication, and I think we were both in the same thought, fabrication, when we started it, I didn't care if it made money. It was going to be worth it. I didn't want it to lose money, but it was going to be worth it if it was a break even. And again, knowing what break even means. So definitely it's better over time when it does make money. The second part, remember you and I talking about, I can't remember what brought it up, but you said, have you noticed that since you've been fabricating, your installation payroll costs have gone way down? And I'm like, yes, why? I don't know if we came up with an answer, but so if I was to calculate the two separately, I might say that fabrication is not making as much money, but the savings in install, so they really have to kind of be thought about together. That was so interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because I could not figure out why. I'm like looking at installation going, why is it so cheap now to install?
Do you guys, the people that fabricate, do you also sell wholesale to other companies in your area, or you just fabricate for yourselves?
Ourselves. Greg does his self.
Just ourselves.
Wow.
Just ourselves. Because what happens invariably is the local glass shops will call me and they'll want a shower door right away. Because there's fabrication houses around. And then I'm not in that business, but I want to be nice to a local glass shop. I don't want to be a bad guy. So I'm like, okay, here it is. And I'll put some kind of small premium on it. And I'm rushing it. And then they're like, oh no, I'll wait for True Light. I'm like, okay. Go ahead, wait for True Light. I mean, no offense. I'm like, so when I got the tempering oven, I was told you're going to fabricate for other people. I know Keith fabricates for other people, but we do not, and I am happy that we do not. Our crossover point for fabrication, I'm going to turn around because my wife's here. What were we doing, 2.5 million? Okay, right around 2.5 million.
So you have some type of, so if you're, like you said earlier, you're doing 240 to 250 showers a month, right? So at some point you have a break even where it's worth it to have the fabrication. If you only did 100 a month, is the fabrication thing losing money? You follow what I'm saying?
Well, 2.5 million was about where our break even was, where we felt comfortable fabricating. And I don't know, Shannon, where were you roughly dollar wise?
Well, it was funny. We realized that we could fabricate when a friend of ours in the glass industry said, well, once you're spending $1 million on glass and hardware and everything, then you're ready to fabricate. And we're going like, well, we're at like 850. Oh my gosh. And so that was kind of the number we were looking at, what we were spending to buy from other people.
And
so your fabrication facility just fabricates shower doors. You stay out of the glass tops, coffee tables, all that,
Oh, we do glass tops and coffee tables. Yeah. Not many.
And wine rooms.
Yeah. But I would say that the fabrication what's amazing is the payroll drop. You think that once you get the facility and you add people to it, you think, oh boy, I'm going to have another big overhead. Now what's amazing is you don't realize how mediocre the fabrication was. We were getting probably a 20% failure rate on glass. And when I say 20% failure rate, hinge cut out in the wrong place, holes in the wrong place, outage on the wrong side, damage, scratch. And kind of like an abusive relationship, you just kind of think, oh, this is how it's supposed to be. And I remember my brother-in-law came to work for me, and the first week he was there, he goes, don't you have another glass supplier? Why do you put up with this? And I'm like, this is the best supplier. And you go to those facilities and you're like, no wonder they have these problems. It's 900 degrees in there. They're moving thousands of pieces a day. And when you fabricate, you care so much because it's Mrs. Jones you got to get the shower door done for. So anybody who's thinking about fabricating, if you have the intestinal fortitude and you are somewhat of a risk taker and it doesn't bother you to put a fair amount of money at risk, I would, I don't know what Shannon would say. If I took away your fabrication and made you buy from suppliers again, would you cry or would you?
Never, never, ever, ever. PTSD would start to hit me. Another thing to kind of add to in fabrication, and I guess it applies in lots of different places, when you buy a piece of equipment, when you're thinking about your numbers, don't forget that equipment costs you a bunch of money. I mean, it's not part of, if you pay for it outright, you're not seeing how much that costs you. Most people aren't doing their monthly depreciation, but remember that thing costs you money. So when you're doing things a lot faster, because you have equipment, you kind of have to throw in a little dollar amount for that equipment because there is a cost there. And same thing when you're buying a truck, you're like, oh, look how much money, how much profit we had this month. And it's like, well, yeah, it's considered profit, but I had to outlay, all this money for equipment and for trucks. And so that has to go in there too. People like to forget about that.
Yeah, some people will assign certain overhead to direct labor. Some people do not. But all I would say is just be consistent with your own numbers. Whether you add that amount, whether you add that, whatever it is. Oh, well, you know what? The gas is direct labor because the gasoline we're driving to a job to install. Okay, just keep it on that side. Don't throw it back and forth. But in our case, we stick to direct labor is just direct labor and pay and benefits. In your case, a little bit overhead, but we're both consistent.
Yeah, we throw a number on top, and my operations manager is always screaming because there's that big number for what it costs for equipment, and you got to put that in there because later you're going to have to replace the equipment. So yeah, we throw it on there. But I agree too, and I could just see a blog out here on the shower things. What's your gross profit? And everybody's going to try and compare, but no one is going to throw in the exact same things. And so one guy's going to say, oh, this is a gross profit or this is a cost of goods sold. And another guy's going to say, no, that's overhead. So I think, yeah, the know your numbers. Important.
I would challenge everybody that's in this group to, whether you know your numbers or not, just to relook at your numbers, and maybe you learned a little bit from this call, something that's a little bit different than you do, just to kind of, double check your stuff and just always be on top of your numbers and always check it. I'm a numbers guy. I always crunch numbers. You can ask Chance. I'm always crunching numbers on everything we do. We know our KPIs and all that stuff. So, and it's helped scale, and you can see what we've done so far in the industry. And it's helped us so much by just by knowing your numbers, knowing if you can afford another truck, knowing if you can afford another guy, knowing health insurance, 401k, all that stuff, incentive programs. We have incentive structures for all of our installers, being able to pay for all that. And it just goes along with scaling. So just being able to track everything.
Yeah, I agree.
Greg, I have a question, please.
Go ahead.
So, I'm just curious to know what is the rate of your occupancy on your tempering oven to supply your own business?
How often do we temper?
No, I mean the rate of occupancy. So do you occupy your oven like 70%, or it's working like fully loaded,
No.
or
Our
you still have-
Occupancy, occupancy.
Yeah,
occupancy, my
thank
apologies.
you.
Yeah,
Still working on that. Thank you.
what's amazing about fabrication is we run our tempering oven 2 days a week,
Mhm.
and we run about 100. I don't even know now, whatever, 240 times 480. And so we run 2 days a week, and we run maybe 4 hours. Let me just say that. And so the oven's
So-
full for those 4 hours, but literally it runs 8 hours right now, a week, 4 hours and 4 hours. Keith's
Do you
probably-
still
That's
buy
good.
stock
That's good.
glass while having a manufacturing?
No. We don't buy any stock doors.
You never did, or you're not anymore?
I did for a short, like one time, and it was a pain. Because you're gonna buy the square doors, you're gonna buy the out of square doors. I think you guys may buy them and do well. I'm not suggesting it's a bad idea. For me, it just didn't work out. I'm buying glass by the truckload.
I'm just curious.
Right now, we get about a truckload, just a little bit more than a truckload a month of glass right now. And that's where a lot of where your savings is. You're buying a truckload with 11 cases, and you're getting it once every 3 weeks. And it's huge savings compared to buying fabricated from somebody else. And I don't even want to know, Keith, what you guys are buying. You guys must be getting a truck a day or something down there, but very impressive.
From
to answer your
what do you
question,
mean, from the
Vito-
float? From float?
Yeah, what you're getting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So to answer the Vito, you don't need to have your occupancy or your volume on your tempering oven running 40 hours a week. You just don't.
Mhm.
Nice.
Thank
You
you.
don't have to now too, because all the new tempering ovens are so well insulated. Most of the cost in the tempering ovens in the beginning was, you hear people say it costs $5,000 to turn a switch on because it was generating so much power to keep the temperature up. And as all the newer ones are so much more well insulated, and the thermal couples inside don't heat up necessarily the whole chamber versus just the spot where the glass is. So they're a lot more efficient. It doesn't take as long to ramp up or come down. So if you're only running a couple times a week or every other day, the ramp up time isn't consuming as much energy. So you don't have to kind of keep it on all the time. That's
And the
smart.
mapping, I think, steps up, does it not? Where it'll start. So it's not creating this huge surge of demand. And so and it is insulated beautifully.
So if I
And you
hear
want to
what you're-
watch when you temper too, with the energy, I think is like right after like noontime, one time during the year, it throws you into peak time versus off peak time.
Yep.
That's a massive cost too.
So if you guys were going to give advice to someone going in that direction, you would say that the investment to buy something new at an entry-level cost for taking out a bigger investment might be more worth it in the long haul than going used and saving a little bit of money in the upfront cost.
No question. If I would, plan would be my numbers, figure out how many months it was going to take to generate the money that I needed to make sure I had enough. So let's say you want to have $250,000 to make this happen. Well, I'm making $30,000 a month. I'm making $20,000 a month. Now, once you know your numbers, you know when you're going to get to the point where you have the cash reserves, you figured out your break-even number, you've talked to people that fabricate, so you know what you're looking at, you know what your electric bill is roughly going to be. These are all questions I had before we tempered. What's my electric bill going to be? I have no idea. What's my breakage rate? What's my glass going to cost when I buy it by the truckload or the case? But I would save up some cash and make sure you know your numbers. And then unless you want to pay for it all cash, go to a bank and get it all set up. If you're not doing fabricating, you don't need 700 pieces of equipment. You need a cutting table, you need a couple edgers, you need a water jet or a CNC, you need maybe some washers and a tempering oven. What have I missed, Keith, for starters? Shannon?
Crane
Crane.
for
Thank you,
unloading the
crane.
truck.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
we used to unload flow trucks with a forklift and then in the air pass it over to another fork. Like I go to bed every night praying no one was going to get killed when we'd unload these. And so when we got that crane, it was a huge weight off the back.
Yeah, and we do have a crane, but we do unload by forklift, but not to another forklift. It's not a.
If anybody saw what we used to do, we'd be arrested right now, no question.
Which is a
You got to
fabulous
do what you got to
segue.
do. You got to do what you got to do in the beginning.
A quick question. What does insurance look like for something like this?
Are you talking about workers' comp
fabricate.
fabrication or?
Fabrication, workers' comp, all of it, any of it. How does
Nothing.
that change when you start fabricating?
No, I'd say the major thing is the equipment cost and the space. If you got the space and you can afford the equipment, don't look
I
back.
think the secret expense that Doug and I almost crashed the whole cards when we started, the one that we kind of didn't think was, is necessary because it was all brand new equipment, is the maintenance. Like you think one day going by without rinsing your polisher, that won't be bad. We'll do it tomorrow. Oh, just wait, because a little piece crusted on there and now it scratches every piece of, like, the maintenance in the factory is the biggest thing. That's why the culture's got to be so good, because they're not going to take the time at the end of a shift after humping 400 pieces of glass to a polisher to clean the machine when they're done. They hate the machine. And so the culture, the manager on the shop floor has got to be good and keep the culture, but the maintenance is probably the biggest, like, death. Just like you were saying earlier, the errors, it's the maintenance in the factory will kill you. Because even if a washer goes down, it's the cheapest machine in the factory versus tempering, it doesn't matter. You're going to have a bottleneck. And so every machine in there's got to be maintained. Yeah.
Wow, that's a brilliant insight right there. I mean, that's something you wouldn't even think about, unless you'd had that experience.
What about like production line, like being like Kaizen and like efficient? Are you guys like trying to think about those things? If you're trying to do it in yourself and fit it into a space that's existing already, you might buy the washer and it might be on the opposite side. So now you're trolleying things from one side to the other, to the tempering oven, craning it over, moving things around. Have you noticed that being a pitfall? Not like having like the Ford production line.
The first tempering facility that we did was in our own space. We had, I believe, 9,000. Do we have 9,000 square feet? 9,000 square feet, of which almost 3,000 was showroom. So we had 6,000 to 7,000 square feet to temper in. As you can imagine, things were very, very tight. And we kind of just did it in that space.
Ours was the same size.
Yeah. I've been in your facility, but the old facility, Keith.
The old one, same size.
Actually,
and everybody will tell you, you can't do it. You can't do it. And we said, no, we had to do exactly what Chance said. We had to touch it 10 more times than you should be, but that's what you had to do to get in the game. That's what you got to do.
Yep. So I would say that's important, but not critical. It wouldn't stop me from tempering, as it didn't stop us last time. And because we tempered, we were able to even scale faster, you know what I'm saying? And just get to the point we want to.
But were you able at the new facilities? I mean, is that like a big thought process to
of course
be super efficient? Yeah.
You want to touch the glass, you want to design your factory to minimize the number of touches, because at the end of the day, you're managing risk. Because when the glass gets delivered to you, it's perfect. Right. And you want it perfect when it comes out of the oven. So you want to touch that thing as fucking few times as possible.
Have you ever seen like View Rails? The online View Rail has a glass facility, and it shows how it's just like a streamlined, like never gets touched. I mean, from start to finish, like almost no human ever has to touch it. It's pretty cool. And I know they have like the game changer ovens and all that kind of stuff too. Like, do you think that's big dollar savings when you're producing that kind of volume?
They got Chinese oven, so they got the worst oven. So don't believe that.
So we started out with the Chinese oven, but again, I'd say it's a fairly straight line process. It doesn't have to go from one equipment back to the same equipment. So it goes from the cutting table, then it goes to the edgers, then it goes to the CNC or the water jets, and then it goes to the washer, and then it goes to the oven. Ours is just a horseshoe shaped. I mean, it's I wouldn't overthink it, and and it's fairly straightforward.
And probably one of the biggest things, you want to make sure that you own your building, because just the electrical to connect the oven is going to cost you over $100,000. So you don't want to be on a leased building that is going to somebody going to be able to take it out from you.
That's interesting. When we were in our old building and we wanted to move, we bought property during the recession. We did everything the right way. We caught the peak, everything. And then we realized, oh, we got to move our tempering oven. And they told us, well, that's a month to take it apart and another month to put it back together. So 2 months we weren't going to have a tempering oven. Now we were already tempering. We called 2 local fabricators. And we said, we'll give you all the glass, not just temper, like you can make it all for us and everything. And they said, not only do we want to do that, we are going to pray every night that you go out of business because of this, because now you become a potential competitor. Right. And so that forced us into buying another larger machine. So we were carrying 2 machines at once. And so not leasing a spot is, I think that's smart because you want to take that possibility right off the table because that'll cripple you.
Right.
That'll cripple you.
But you got to know your numbers. I mean, you
Yeah.
guys
Oh,
gotta
yeah.
know your
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah.
You got to know your numbers. If you're gonna
Oh, yeah.
attempt
You
to-
better know your numbers.
Because, you know,
You'll
slow
learn
down.
real quick. It'll be zero.
Right. If you financed it all and had almost nothing down on it and the bank took a chance and all that jazz and the recession comes and you can't sustain a 20-25% drop in profits and margins and sales. I mean, sometimes a 25% drop in sales is a 90% drop in profits. So you really got to know your numbers if you're going to temper.
So the moral of the story is know your numbers. Greg Stowell, thanks so much, man, for coming on. That was a great presentation. Thanks for answering our questions. I think this has been an awesome call. I think we had like 28 people on the Zoom call at one point. That was just riveting. Thanks so much.
The worst phrase in the glass business, we have to go back to that job.
It sounds like a t-shirt.
Tell them be back.
All right, everybody. Well, come back next week and we'll do it all again.